My name is Emily Parker. I'm 33 years old, and last week my own brother held a vote at family dinner to fire me from the family. No, that's not a joke. I was sitting at the end of the long wooden table in his restaurant, a place I'd helped him keep from collapsing more times than I can count, when he suddenly scraped his chair back and stood up like he was hosting some company meeting. My fork was still halfway to my mouth when he cleared his throat and said, loudly enough for the kitchen staff to hear, "We talked about it. We voted. You're not family anymore." For a second, I honestly thought it was some twisted joke. Then I heard the clapping. My parents, my little sister. A couple of relatives he'd invited. They actually put their hands together like he'd just delivered a brave speech. My chest went cold, but my face didn't move. I've sat in too many boardrooms to show panic when someone tries to blindside me. Instead, I took a slow breath, reached down beside my chair, and set a thick, navy blue folder on the table. My brother's eyes flicked to it, and for the first time that night, his confident smile wavered. "So that's it?" I asked quietly. "You held a vote?" He nodded, jaw tight. "It's done." I let a small laugh slip out. "Then I guess you won't be needing this." I slid the folder toward him, the cardstock whispering against the tablecloth. He opened it, flipped the first page, and his face drained of color. By the third page, he wasn't smiling. By the fifth, he was shaking. When he hit the last document, he started screaming. Before I tell you what he saw in that folder, and what I did after I walked out of that restaurant, pause this for a second and tell me in the comments. What time is it for you right now? And where in the world are you watching from? I want to see just how far one family dinner can travel. I never planned on becoming my family's unpaid accountant, therapist, and emergency fund. It just happened. When you're the one who understands numbers and consequences, people either respect you or exploit you. In my family, they chose the second option. I watched my brother's fingers tremble as he flipped back to the first page. I knew exactly what he was seeing, because I'd printed and tabbed every document myself the night before. Page 1 was a summary, a clean, color-coded timeline of every bailout, every temporary loan, every "can you just cover this for now?" that I'd ever given him and my parents over the last 10 years. Total, $178,430.67. That number used to live only in my spreadsheets. Tonight, it was staring every person at that table in the face. "What is this?" my brother snapped, but his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "You tell me," I replied, keeping my tone level. "You're the one who says I've been detached, that I never show up, that I don't deserve a seat at this table." He flipped to the next tab. Under a plastic sleeve was a scanned copy of a promissory note with his signature on it. It was dated 3 years ago, the night before his grand opening, when he'd stood in my apartment kitchen shaking while I printed the forms. He'd promised to pay me back $60,000 within 5 years, plus interest, in exchange for my wiring the money that stopped the bank from pulling his startup loan. At the time, I told myself I didn't need the paper. He was my brother. We were family. But I'd printed it anyway. "You signed that," I said quietly. "Saved you from default. Got your liquor license approved. Remember? This is a betrayal," he muttered, but it sounded weak. "No," I said. "This is documentation." I watched my parents' eyes move from line to line. My mom's lips parted when she reached the section titled Medical Expenses, Karen Parker. That tab held my credit card statements, highlighting, month after month, the charges from the hospital when Mom's insurance had refused to cover certain procedures. I'd wiped out my emergency fund twice to keep collectors off their backs. And then came the part that really made him squirm. I saw the vein in his neck twitch as he reached the tab marked Audio and Messages. Inside the pocket were transcripts of voicemails and late-night texts, printed in neat black letters. "I swear I'll pay you back. Just don't tell Mom and Dad how bad it is." If you don't send something today, they're going to shut us down. Next to each transcript was a QR code and a tiny USB stick clipped to the cardboard. If anyone wanted to hear the original recordings, it would take them 5 seconds. I leaned forward, elbows on the table. You said nobody asked me to help, I reminded him. Should I play the messages where you were crying in the walk-in fridge at 2 in the morning, begging me to cover payroll? His eyes flashed. You're weaponizing this. No, I said again, even though my own pulse was roaring in my ears. I'm just putting the truth in print so it can't be rewritten based on who's shouting the loudest. My sister, my sweet, conflict-avoiding little sister, finally spoke. Emily, you kept all of this? She whispered. I met her gaze. Would you have believed me without it? She looked down at her lap, and for a moment I saw the first crack in her certainty. You see a folder? I continued, turning back to my brother. But what I see is 10 years of my life. 10 years of taking calls during meetings. 10 years of just this once that turned into, you're not family anymore, when I finally said no. He slammed the folder shut like the papers had burned him. So what? He snapped. You kept receipts. Congratulations. That doesn't make you family. You think waving a stack of paper gives you the right to sit here and act like a martyr? The word hit me harder than I expected. Martyr. That was exactly how they wanted to see me. Someone who chose to suffer and should stay quiet about it. I could feel everyone watching us, forks frozen halfway to their mouths, wine glasses untouched. The entire restaurant closed, just for family tonight, had become a courtroom, and my brother thought he was the judge. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice low but steady. Have you ever wondered if the people who sacrifice for you actually feel appreciated? Or do you just assume they'll keep bleeding so you don't have to? For the first time, no one rushed to answer. The silence around the table felt heavier than the folder. In that silence, I realized the confrontation about money was just the surface. The real fight was about what family meant, and whether I belonged here at all. His sentence kept echoing in my head like a bad recording. We voted. You're not family anymore. I'd heard a lot of ugly things in my life. Investors losing millions, employees being laid off through no fault of their own, but nothing had cut me like those words from my own brother. You're making this bigger than it is, he said now, spreading his hands as if he were the reasonable one. You always do this, Emily. Twist things into some grand narrative where you're the hero who saved us all. I almost laughed. You stood up in your own restaurant and held a secret ballot to exile me, I replied. How much bigger do you want it to be? He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him finish. Years of swallowing my thoughts had taught me exactly how fast you have to move if you don't want to be talked over. Do you want to know what this feels like? I asked. It feels like I've been the scaffolding around a building that's falling apart, and instead of fixing the cracks, you decided the problem was the scaffolding. My dad shifted in his chair. Come on, he said, rubbing his forehead. It's not that dramatic. Your brother's just tired of feeling judged. Judged. That word had been thrown at me like a dart my entire life. Too blunt with the truth, too rigid with boundaries, too much. Yet somehow it was never too much when the money cleared. I looked at my brother, really looked, and for the first time I let myself imagine what it must feel like to be him in this moment. Behind the defensiveness, I could see something tight and panicked in his eyes. Not guilt, fear. Not of losing me, but of losing control of the story he'd told everyone about who I was and what I'd done. You think I enjoy keeping track? I asked. You think I get some thrill out of knowing precisely when I paid for your new ovens, or the 15 grand that went into updating the patio so you could host weddings? I tapped the folder. I only started writing it all down when I realized you were rewriting the past every time we fought. He scoffed. You're literally reading off a scorecard at family dinner. Because you forced a game, I shot back. You voted. You made this a contest where someone had to be in and someone had to be out. You turned love into a majority rule. That shut him up. Momentarily. My sister spoke again, her voice so small it barely reached me. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" she asked. "About how much it was hurting you?" I swallowed. Because every time I tried, I got told I was overreacting, or being ungrateful, or trying to buy affection. I turned to my brother. "Isn't that what you said last month? That I was trying to buy the right to be difficult by paying bills?" His jaw clenched. I watched that memory play behind his eyes as clearly as if we'd rewound time. We'd been in his office after hours, an empty bottle of craft beer between us, when he'd thrown that line at me. Back then, it had stunned me into silence. Now, it fueled me. "You really want to know what I see when I look at you right now?" I asked, my voice dropping. "I see a man who begged for help when it suited him and now can't stand that the evidence exists." His chair scraped loudly as he stood up again. "You think you're better than me because you have a degree and a corporate job," he shouted. "You walk in here in your blazer and act like we should all bow to your spreadsheets." I stood too. I hated that we were towering over the table like two rival CEOs in a boardroom instead of siblings, but maybe that's what we'd turned into without noticing. "I've never thought I was better than you," I said slowly. "I thought I was responsible for you. That's the problem." For a heartbeat, the room blurred. I saw it. Not the restaurant, not the present, but a future I had been hoping for without admitting it to myself. A birthday party years from now, kids running between tables, my parents blowing out candles together while my brother clapped, and my sister filmed everything. In that vision, I was there, laughing, feeling like we'd survived something hard and come out stronger. Then the vision shattered, replaced by the reality in front of me. My brother's face twisted with anger, my father's shoulders slumped, my mother chewing her lip to keep from crying, my sister staring at her plate as if it could tell her what to do. "Do you ever wonder," I asked softly, more to myself than to them, "what family really means when they can vote you out like a bad employee?" No one answered. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerators in the kitchen and the faint clink of a glass somewhere. I realized with a clarity that almost hurt that I was done pleading to be believed. The folder wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror, and they hated what it showed. "Sit down, both of you," my mom said suddenly. Her voice, usually gentle, had a sharp edge to it. My brother and I lowered ourselves back into our seats, but the tension between us didn't ease. "We are not doing this," she continued, looking at me like I was the one who'd started the fire. "This is supposed to be a nice dinner. We wanted to talk about how distant you've been, Emily. That's all." I stared at her. "You voted," I reminded her. "That's not talking." She flinched, then glanced at my dad for backup. He cleared his throat. Your brother, we all just feel like you've become detached," I supplied. "Cold? Selfish?" He sighed. "You barely come over anymore. You don't stay late when you do. You don't answer every call." I let out a humorless laugh. "You mean I stopped showing up every time there's a crisis you created?" My brother's fist hit the table. "This is what I mean," he said. "You make everything sound like our fault." "Isn't it?" I snapped. "Who racked up credit card debt buying kitchen equipment without reading the interest rates? Who refused to tell the landlord the truth about your finances and signed a lease you couldn't afford? Who told investors you had backing you didn't actually have until I stepped in?" I could feel myself spiraling, the years of late-night spreadsheets and panicked phone calls piling up in my throat. I'd always promised myself I wouldn't become the bitter older sibling who never lets anything go, but here I was, reciting history like charges in an indictment. "Emily," my sister's voice broke through my rant. She sounded like she was trying not to cry. "It's not that we don't appreciate you. When did you say it? I asked, turning to her. When did anyone say, "Hey Em, thank you for making sure Mom's hospital didn't send us to collections"? Or, "Thank you for spending 3 weekends cleaning up our paperwork so the IRS wouldn't audit us"? I don't remember those conversations. It's she, my mother whispered. We thought you knew. I shook my head. That sentence had been the soundtrack of my life. We thought you knew. We assumed you understood. We figured you'd be fine. You know what I thought? I said quietly. I thought love meant stepping up when people you care about are drowning. I thought that's what you did. But at some point, helping stopped being an act of love and turned into a threat you held over my head. My brother scoffed. A threat? You're the one who brought a legal dossier to dinner. I met his eyes. You stood up and told me I'm not family. You held a vote about my existence. You don't see how that sounds like a threat? He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time all night, he looked unsure. What's actually scaring you right now? I asked him, my voice softer. That everyone can see how much you've taken? Or that I've finally stopped acting like it's fine? His gaze flicked toward the folder like it was a live grenade. And in a way, it was. Because buried toward the back, under all the receipts and transcripts, was the part he hadn't reached yet. The part that would change everything. I'd debated for days whether to include it. It was my safety net, my line in the sand. But if he wanted to make this about who belonged and who didn't, then I needed him to understand the stakes. A strange calm settled over me. Maybe this is what happens when you finally stop trying to hold the whole structure together. You realize that if it collapses, it was never stable to begin with. I used to picture us old, I said, surprising myself. You and me yelling at a TV during some game, Lily laughing in the kitchen with her kids, Mom fussing over everyone's plates. I thought if I just kept absorbing the blows now, we'd get there eventually. I felt my throat tighten. But tonight, when you said those words, something broke. And I don't think it was just me. My sister's eyes filled with tears. My mother dabbed at hers with a napkin. My dad stared at the folder like it might reveal an easier answer if he glared hard enough. Family is not a membership you can revoke by majority, I said. It's supposed to be a choice you keep making even when you're angry. And if you can vote me out this easily, maybe you already chose. Around us, the restaurant lights glowed warm and golden, but the room had never felt colder. Okay, enough, my brother said, but his voice had lost some of its earlier bravado. He tugged the folder back toward himself and thumbed to the end, almost like he wanted to prove there was nothing more I could possibly have on him. I watched his eyes scan the last section, and that's when the screaming started. "What is this?" he shouted, jabbing a finger at the page. "You can't do this." My dad leaned over. "What's she talking about?" he asked, voice wary. I answered before my brother could spin anything. "That," I said, "is a letter from my attorney. It's a formal notice of intent to withdraw my personal guarantee from the loan that's keeping this restaurant open." My mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Emily, I warned you last month," I reminded my brother. "When you called me cold for not wiring another 20,000, I told you I wasn't going to be your emergency exit anymore. You laughed and said I'd never let you sink." I gestured to the page. "You were wrong. If you do this, the bank will reevaluate the loan," I finished for him. "They'll see that the only person with decent credit and a stable income attached to this place is no longer willing to be liable. And then yes, they might call it, or renegotiate, or demand a different guarantor." My brother's face flushed an alarming shade of red. "You'd destroy my life over a fight?" "You tried to erase me over a vote," I said calmly. "All I'm doing is stepping out of the way and letting your choices catch up with you." My sister shook her head like she was trying to dislodge water from her ears. "Emily, wait," she said. "Is there really no other way?" I looked at her. I gave him other ways. I offered to help restructure the debt. I begged him to stop using his personal credit cards for business expenses. I spent nights redoing his books for free, and every time I suggested a boundary, I was told I was being controlling or dramatic. I turned back to my brother. You tell me, David. What else was I supposed to do? Just keep signing my name on things until there was nothing left of me? He glared at me like a cornered animal. You know what this will do to Mom and Dad? To me? Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I was expendable, I replied. You're not expendable, my mother said quickly. We just voted, I repeated. You keep forgetting that part. She winced. We weren't thinking clearly. No, I said. You were thinking exactly as clearly as you wanted to. You believed he'd always be the golden boy and I'd always be the safety net. You didn't expect me to arrive with a parachute of my own. My dad's voice cracked through the air like a snapped branch. What do you want, Emily? He demanded. What would make you stay? Just say it. For a moment, I honestly didn't know how to answer. What did I want? An apology? A reversal of the vote? A time machine that could take me back to the first time I'd said, sure, I'll cover it, and make me say no instead? I took a breath. I want you to admit what you've done, I said finally. Not the money. The way you've used me. The way you've made me feel like an outsider unless I'm useful. I want you to say it out loud. My brother laughed bitterly. So you want a confession, he said. You really are a cop with a spreadsheet. Call it whatever you want, I replied. But until you can say the truth, all of it, I'm not putting my name on anything else for you. That letter goes out Monday morning if nothing changes. My sister whispered. People in the comments are going to say you're ruthless. I blinked. It took me a second to realize I'd been narrating in my head like this was already a story I was telling. Maybe that was how I was coping, by imagining that somewhere out there, someone was watching this play out and thinking, finally, someone picked themselves for once. Let me ask you watching this, I said quietly in my mind, the way I would to a camera. Would you keep rescuing people who'd just voted you out of their lives? Or would you finally walk away? My brother's chair squeaked as he slumped back down, the fight leaking out of him all at once. For the first time that night, he didn't look like the confident owner of a trendy restaurant. He looked like a tired man who'd built his whole identity on something that was finally being questioned. For a brief second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. You can't seriously do this, he muttered, staring at the letter from my attorney as if it might spontaneously burst into flames. You're my sister. I tilted my head. Am I? I asked quietly. 5 minutes ago, you were pretty sure I wasn't. He flinched like I'd hit him. That was cruel, I said. Public, humiliating. Exactly what you accuse me of doing now just because I brought facts instead of feelings. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was, "You're blowing this out of proportion." There it was. That old, familiar sentence they always pulled out when I dared to react. You're overreacting. You're too intense. You're making it bigger than it is. It used to work. It made me second-guess my own perception, smooth my tone, apologize just to restore peace. Tonight, it only made something in me harden. You stood up in your own business, I reminded him, in front of our parents and extended family, and announced that there'd been a vote and I was no longer part of this family. Do you hear how that sounds out loud? If a stranger told you that story, what would you say to them? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sit down, everybody calm down. My dad cut in, his voice strained. We're all saying things we don't mean. I turned to him. No, I said, more gently than I felt. He meant it. That's the whole point. This didn't come out of nowhere. You don't organize a vote overnight. My dad rubbed his temples, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. We were trying to make you see how far you'd pulled away, Emily, he said. We thought if we showed you the consequences of your distance, you'd come running back, I finished. Work harder? Give more? Try to earn my place again? His mouth snapped shut. The silence that followed was like a verdict. You didn't vote because you lost me, I continued. You voted because you realized you were losing control over me. There's a difference. My mother reached across the table, fingers trembling. We didn't think it through, she whispered. We thought if we did something dramatic, you'd wake up and realize how much this was hurting us. I looked at her hand on the tablecloth, the same hand that had signed hospital forms, the same hand I'd held when she was shaking from medication side effects. I remembered what it felt like to swipe my card and tell her, "Don't worry about it, Mom," while she cried into my shoulder, promising she'd make it up to me somehow. That somehow had never arrived. Do you hear yourself? I asked softly. You hurt me on purpose to prove you were hurting? How is that love? No one answered. Somewhere in the kitchen a timer beeped, harsh and mechanical. No one moved to silence it. The sound cut through the conversation before fading into the background hum of refrigeration and distant traffic. You want to know the truth? I said. I didn't pull away because I stopped caring. I pulled away because every interaction started to feel like a transaction. Every text felt like the opening line of a request. Every "How are you?" was followed by "Can you?" My brother scoffed. So what? We're not allowed to need you? You're allowed to need me, I replied. You're not entitled to me. There's a difference. My sister finally spoke up, voice thin. If you walk away now, isn't that forever? I looked at her, at the woman who still wore the same nervous habit from childhood, twisting a strand of hair around her finger whenever she was overwhelmed. I don't know what forever looks like, I admitted. All I know is what the next step looks like. And right now, the next step is me standing up and not sitting back down just because you all panic when I do. My brother shook his head, laughing without humor. You think you're so strong, he said. You think walking away makes you powerful. But you'll regret this. You'll be alone. Friends come and go. We're your only real family. There it was. The guilt grenade. No one will love you like we do. You'll be alone without us. You're lucky we even put up with you. You keep saying family like it's a trump card, I replied. But ask yourself this. What does that word actually mean if you can revoke it with a show of hands? I glanced around the restaurant, the framed magazine covers declaring Parker & Sons, the heart of the neighborhood, the chalkboard menu with careful cursive, the empty chairs stacked against the far wall. This place used to feel like a symbol of us, our grit, our scrappiness, our ability to build something from nothing. Now it felt like something else entirely. You know what this restaurant really is? I said, my voice softening. It's a broken ride at an old amusement park. The kind that should have been shut down years ago. The bolts are loose. The rails are warped. The safety warnings have peeled off. But the music still plays. The lights still flash. And you keep waving people on, promising them it's fine, because you're too scared to admit it's not. My brother narrowed his eyes. So, you're just going to walk away from the wreckage? No, I said. I already tried to repair the ride. I paid for new tracks. I replaced bolts. I rewrote the safety manual. And when I finally said, hey, maybe we should stop letting people on, you all told me I was ruining the fun. I drew in a breath. I can't stop you from running it until it collapses. I can only step off and refuse to be strapped in when the crash happens. My dad exhaled, the sound heavy. We raised you to be tough, he said, shaking his head, to not give up on family. I met his eyes. You raised me to believe that loyalty meant carrying more than my share and never complaining, I said. You taught me that the right thing to do was to show up, no matter the cost to myself. But you never taught me what to do when the people I'd die for were perfectly okay, watching me slowly kill myself for them. My mom's lip trembled. We didn't know it felt like that, she whispered. We thought you liked being the strong one. I swallowed. I liked feeling useful, I admitted. Until useful turned into used. My sister wiped at her eyes. Can't we compromise? She pleaded. Can't you keep helping? Just not as much? Can't you stay, but with boundaries? Boundaries only work, I said gently, if people respect them. I've tried setting them with you all. You treated them like obstacles to get around, not lines not to cross. I paused, then added, if I stayed after you voted me out, what message would that send? That you can treat me however you want, and I'll still come back as long as you call it family? I can't keep teaching you that lesson. For a brief, surreal moment, I imagined two versions of my future. In one, I apologized. I shoved the folder back into my bag, told them I'd cancel the letter, maybe even offered to help restructure the loan again. We'd all cry, hug, promise to do better. A month later, the same patterns would creep back in. Another crisis, another request. The vote would become a story they told at holidays, laughing about the time we all got a little carried away and Emily was so dramatic. In the other version, I didn't apologize. I let them be angry. I let them talk about me however they wanted when I wasn't in the room. I sent the letter. The bank called. My brother faced the numbers without my name cushioning them. My parents had to adjust to a reality where I wasn't their financial shock absorber. It would be hard, messy, painful, but not fatal. And in that version, somewhere down the line, I might actually sleep at night. People watching this are going to think I'm heartless, I thought for a second, as if I were already telling you this story. They'll say, I could never do that to my family. Maybe they're right. Maybe they've never been asked to sign their name to a sinking ship while being told they're the ungrateful one. Aloud I said, if I stay under these conditions, I'll become someone I don't like. Resentful. Bitter. The kind of person who smiles at you and keeps score silently. I refuse to be that version of myself just to keep you comfortable. My brother's voice lowered, hoarse. So that's your choice, he said. You choose money over blood. I almost laughed at how simplistic he needed it to be. No, I answered. I'm choosing honesty over denial, accountability over convenience. And yes, I'm choosing my sanity over your expectations. I pushed my chair back. The sound was oddly final, a small, scraping punctuation mark at the end of a very long sentence. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my fingers, but underneath the fear there was something else, a strange, steady quiet. Emily, my sister whispered, reaching for me, if you walk out now, what if things never go back to how they were? I looked at her hand, then at her face. Lily, I said softly, how they were is what brought us here. I squeezed her fingers. I don't want how they were back. I want something healthier. And I can't drag you all there with me if you're not ready. My dad spoke one last time. When you need us, he said, and there was a bitterness in his tone. Don't forget who was there for you when you were a kid. I won't, I said. I also won't forget who was there for me when I was an adult. And right now, that person is me. I picked up the folder. It felt lighter than when I'd walked in, even though nothing inside had changed. The difference was simple. For the first time in my life, I wasn't holding it for them. I was holding it for me. I turned toward the door. One last question, I said, pausing with my hand on the back of my chair, speaking as much to the invisible audience in my head as to the people in the room. If your family stood up at dinner and voted you out, would you stay and keep paying the bill just to prove you're loyal? Or would you finally get up, walk away, and see who you are without their vote? None of them answered. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they didn't understand the question yet. That was okay. For the first time, their answer didn't determine my next move. I slid my bag over my shoulder, took one last look at the people I loved who didn't know how to love me back without conditions, and walked toward the door, already stepping into the version of my life where I chose myself on purpose. I wish I could tell you that the conversation ended with a grand gesture, that someone stood up, knocked their chair back, and said, "This is wrong. Emily stays." I wish I could tell you my brother tore up the vote in front of everyone and apologized, that my parents rushed to my side, that we all hugged in the soft restaurant light and decided to rebuild from honesty. That would make a neat little bow for this story, but that's not what happened. What happened was this. I gathered the folder, slid the documents back inside, and stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice didn't. "I'm not sending that letter because I want you to fail," I told my brother. "I'm sending it because I refuse to succeed alone while you drag me down. You wanted the power to decide who belongs. You have it. You just don't get to keep my safety net, too." My sister grabbed my wrist. "Please don't go," she whispered. "Don't let this be the story of us." I squeezed her fingers. "It's not the end," I promised. "It's just the part where I stop writing myself as the villain in a narrative you created." I looked at my parents one last time. "I love you," I said, "but I won't keep paying the bill for choices you're not willing to own." Then I walked out of the restaurant. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back through the windows to see if anyone followed. I stepped into the cool night air and felt something I hadn't in years. Light. Not because it didn't hurt. God, it hurt. But because for the first time, the weight on my shoulders was finally mine, and mine alone. 6 months later, I sat in a small, sunlit office that smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. My name was on the frosted glass door, Emily Parker Consulting. Financial Boundaries and Recovery. It had started as a joke. Friends teasing me that I could make a living teaching people how not to become their family's ATM, and then slowly, it became real. I left my corporate job 2 months after that dinner. Turns out, when you stop using all your energy to keep everyone else afloat, you have a lot left over to build something of your own. My phone buzzed. A text from Lily lit up the screen. "They got the notice from the bank today," it read. "David is furious. Mom is panicking. Dad is finally asking questions he should have asked years ago." I stared at the message, my stomach twisting. Part of me wanted to jump in, to fix it, to call the bank and smooth things over. Old habits don't die. They tap you on the shoulder and say, "We could still fix this, you know." Another message came through before I could reply. "I'm not texting to get you to fix it," she wrote. "I just thought you should know they're finally dealing with the mess without you. It's ugly, but it's theirs." I exhaled slowly. "How are you?" I typed back. "I miss you." Her reply came quickly. "I miss you too. I've been watching videos about boundaries. Everyone in the comments keeps saying the same thing. You can love people and still choose yourself." I'm starting to get it. I smiled, eyes stinging. "You'd be surprised how many people need to hear that sentence," I wrote. "I built a business on it." There was a pause. Then, "Do you think, one day, we could sit down, just you and me? No votes. No money. Just sisters?" My throat tightened. "Yeah," I replied, "I'd like that." A year after the vote, I heard through the grapevine, meaning my sister and a couple of cousins who still followed me on social media, that Parker and Sons had new owners. The bank had renegotiated the loan on the condition that my brother step down and sell his majority share. He kept a small percentage, but he wasn't the boss anymore. My parents had to sell their big house and move into a smaller place. The world did not end. They didn't starve. They didn't die without my credit score. They survived. Without me, just like they'd insisted they could. And me? I survived without them. More than that, I healed. Slowly, messily, with bad days where I missed them so much I could hardly breathe, and good days where I laughed with new friends over dinner and realized I'd gone hours without thinking about the vote. People like to say, blood is thicker than water, as if that settles everything. But the full saying, if you look it up, is actually closer to the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. In other words, the relationships you choose can be stronger than the ones you're born into. I didn't stop being a daughter or a sister the night I walked out of that restaurant. They stopped being my safe place. So I built a new one. If you've watched this far, let me ask you one last thing. What did you learn from my story? Have you ever had to choose between your peace and your family's expectations? Tell me in the comments. Because somewhere out there, another Emily is sitting at a table, being told she's not family anymore, and she needs to know she's not alone.